Well, happy Wednesday to you, Mission Hills Church. It is wonderful, as always, to be able to reach out to you in this way. I miss you every day, not just on Wednesdays. I miss you every day of the week. I know you miss being together as a church in all the ways that we enjoy it normally. We're just praying, I know you are too, that things can get back to something that we were used to before, only better, and that day's coming. But it's great to connect with you in this day in my midweek update. I was actually reading in 2 Peter earlier today, and it made me laugh because I came across that verse. It's actually verse 8, and let me read it for you. It says, "But do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years." And then he goes on, he says, "And 1,000 years is like 1 day." But I got stuck on that. With the Lord, 1 day is like 1,000 years. I mean, that being the case, it's fair to say that we are a lot more like God than previously imagined. Because for us, I don't know about you, I'm sure it's the same. One of these days that we've been experiencing, just one of these days, it feels like forever. And certainly, this season feels like 1,000 years. We've done 10 Sundays in a row broadcasting into your living rooms and family rooms and dens and kitchens for our 9 o'clock worship service. 10 of them. And we've got more to come. So it can feel like this is just an endurance race. And the nature of an endurance race is sometimes it just gets weary and tiring. And I know we're all feeling some of that. And I just want to encourage you this morning. In fact, I wanted to let you inside my head a little bit. Not a lot of space up there, but just to share with you some of my thoughts and my perspectives and kind of what I'm anticipating happening as we go from spring into summer, and the whole question of when can we be together again? And I'm asking that question too. So I thought I would take this time just to share with you some of what I've been processing so that at least you'll know what I'm thinking. And hopefully that will bring some measure of encouragement anyway. One of the things I've been doing is spending a lot of time talking to other pastors. Matter of fact, every Thursday, about 20 to 25 of us pastors from local South Orange County churches, we're on a Zoom meeting. And the whole intent there is to encourage each other, to share ideas, what are each of our churches doing, to pray together, to brainstorm together how we can do things together. And we ask each other the question, hey, if we're allowed to get back together again, what would it look like for your church if you can get back together in groups of 20 or 50 or 100 or 200? And so we're sort of going down all those hypothetical trails and what might it look like. So a lot of conversing is going on with church leadership, church pastors, and that always has a good result, I believe. So I'm thankful for the fact that I can pick their brains and they can pick mine. Let me share with you some of my thoughts. Like I said, first of all, let me say this. We are planning to follow state and county guidelines. That's what we're planning on doing. And I'll speak more to that in a few minutes. But with that said, I don't know if the number is going to be up to 20, but I'm guessing obviously in increments we're going to be allowed to get back toward what we were used to. But that'll happen in just incremental stages. And let's say the first stage is you can meet in groups of up to 20. At some point that's going to be reality. I think when we can get 20 of us together, and obviously all the social distancing in play, but when we can meet in groups of up to 20, we're going to experience great relief and I think enormous encouragement, because at that point then our life groups can meet. We have well over 400 people in life groups. By the way, when we can meet again as life groups, we're starting new ones so that if you're not in a life group, you can get in one. Because when we can get into groups of up to 20, then we can do things like get your group together on a Sunday morning and have a worship service watch party together. Have coffee and donuts in someone's living room, watch the worship service, sing together, and have brunch afterwards. So that'll be an enormous encouragement. Or meet with your life group during the week. Meet at a park, meet at someone's home. Talk to me, you can meet in the patio at the church if it's not being torn up, right? There's all sorts of ways that we could then meet as life groups, and I think that would really encourage us. Plus, once you can meet with up to 20, you can have people over for dinner and not be concerned. So anyways, that's one thought. And my thinking is hopefully that would happen by mid-June. hopefully at the latest, late June. Again, there's a lot of ambiguity because we can only deal with the information that's given to us. But I do sense that we're going to start seeing some things happen, maybe at a faster pace than we've been used to up to this point with, if you will, the reopening of our state. And like I said, if it's up to 20, we're going to feel an enormous encouragement. Then further down the road, obviously, maybe sometime mid-July, end of July, they'll say, hey, you can get in groups of 50. Well, once we can do that, we can get real creative with that as well. We could actually have, for example, a midweek night of praise, like for an hour, from 6 to 7 o'clock, 7 to 8 o'clock. Do a couple of them in one evening where up to 50 can come. We'll have the band, we can sing praise songs together, have a time of prayer together, obviously all with the social distancing measures in place, but to bring in 50 at a time and have just a beautiful time of worship, and then do another 50 and have a beautiful time of worship. So I'm praying that could be something that could happen by midsummer. So again, incrementally, obviously, that's how these things go. They open up. How fast, how slow, it's anybody's guess. But eventually, we'll be at the place where we'll be able to have a couple of hundred people together. Well then, goodness, we could have an entire worship service at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock, 9 and 11 on a Sunday. So let me speak to that just for a couple minutes. First of all, moving forward, there will never be a time when we do not have a live streaming option available on Sunday mornings. We were already talking about how to put that into play before COVID-19 became a reality. That is, we have our 9 a.m. service and our 11 o'clock. Let's live stream one of those so that people that are away on vacation or a business trip or sick at home or have a family member sick at home and they can't come to Mission Hills, they can see the live stream. So that'll always be an option moving forward. But once they say, hey, you can get a couple 200, 250 together, we could talk about having a worship service again. The part that gets a little bit unknown is, okay, then how do you do that with all of the social distancing requirements in play? So what impact would, if you're opening up the worship center, what impact does that have? Are we allowed to have our bathrooms open? Are we allowed to serve coffee and donuts? What about kids ministry? You can't put masks on kids and they're not going to social distance to 6 feet. That's just not the nature of being a child. So when you start looking at all of those variables, you then have to get real creative as to how that would then work. I'm not saying there isn't an answer. I'm just saying, even when they say you can have a couple hundred at a time, that doesn't mean it's going to be the experience that we used to have pre-COVID-19. It would still require that social distancing measures be taken. So what impact does that have? We don't need to worry about that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I actually think what's going to happen is before they say you can have a couple hundred inside your worship center, they'll say if you want to meet at a park, open air, that's a safer environment with this pandemic, with COVID-19. So I think that's going to become an option before moving into our worship center as an option. And goodness, we could do parking lot service here. We could choose a park and meet at a park and have worship and a message and everything that we're used to in an open air setting, still with certain social distancing, measures in play. But I think that's probably going to open up, hopefully. I'm just praying that opens up before we get to the end of the summer. So those are just some of my thoughts. I, like you, get weary of all of this and wish we could just change it. But let me encourage you with a couple of other things. We are making plans for the very near future. I mean, in the next set of weeks, June, to begin drive-through prayer, a social distancing style, a social distancing version of drive-through prayer. And there's an easy way to do that and maintain social distancing measures. But we need to get our drive-through prayer up and running again. You can volunteer for that, whether you've ever volunteered for that before or not. And that'll put you in a serving capacity that I think would encourage you. It's also the case that we have been in touch with the City of Mission Viejo, and in speaking with them, I let them know we'd like to do our city employee appreciation lunch like we've done the last 5-6 years. Except we would do this one drive-through style. because again, in keeping with social distancing measures, we could pull it off that way. In-N-Out Burger, come to the church, drive in, drive out. You just do drive-through style. If you want to serve, you could be part of serving there too. I also had a Zoom meeting this morning with some pastors, 2 pastors from Saddleback Church and 1 from Rock Harbor of Mission Viejo. And we were brainstorming how we could work together. And some really cool things are going to come out of that. I won't tell you all of them right now. I'll share one of them, and that is Rock Harbor Mission Viejo, Saddleback Church, and Mission Hills. That's our church, right? Mission Hills Church. We're going to lock arms and lay plans for feeding every single employee at Mission Hospital either a lunch or a dinner. It could be Chick-fil-A, it could be In-N-Out Burger, but we want to just shower love on them and bless them in that way. So what I'm trying to tell you is there's some things right here on the horizon, not months and months away, but just within the next set of weeks in the month of June, there are some wonderful things that we'll realize by way of reaching out and serving. And that's what the church does, and that's what we want to do. And so we'll be able to lean into those things, okay? So that, I think, will be a great encouragement to us. But let me say again, I really believe that once we can get up to 20 people together, we are going to feel so much more normal. I realize that's not the big worship service yet, but we will feel so much more normal if we can be in our life groups, because life groups are the life of the church. Those are the people that we dialogue with at a deeper level and lean on in greater ways. And again, if you're not in a life group, email me at the church, info@missionalchurch.com, and we will get you involved in a life group. But when those can open up, oh my goodness, I think we're going to feel so much better. So hopefully that won't be very far from now. I'm praying that happens maybe late June at the latest. So I'll keep you posted. I don't have any insider information from the government. And speaking of the government, let me just say a couple more things. You by now probably have heard there are some churches that are planning to open on May 31st, here in just over a week's time. They're choosing to open up their campuses and enter into their worship centers, their sanctuaries, whatever they call them, and have church all together, starting May 31st. Church United is a very good organization. I've participated with them, been a part of their stuff, and they're a really good organization, Church United. Jim Doman is the president and primary leader of Church United. That is the organization that is organizing, rallying any churches that want to be a part of what they're doing to open up on the 31st. Now, let me say something about that. I've chosen not to participate as a church in opening up on May 31st. They have retained an attorney to help them write a declaration. They've retained that same attorney group to help them write a formal letter to Governor Gavin Newsom. And they're outlining, and I won't get into all the details, I'll just give you a couple of things that I think are important. They outline why they think churches should be included in phase 2 and be able to gather right away. That churches are essential, and that Governor Newsom has overlooked that reality. Okay. But at the end of the day, they're not asking permission, they're making a declaration. Permission granted or not, and it won't be granted. They're opening on the 31st. Which triggers then a question. At what point do you decide that you are responding to a higher authority than the government authority that's over your state or local area? And you're probably familiar with Romans chapter 13, where God, through Paul, very clearly says, I'll read it for you. This would be verse 1 of chapter 13. Let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. So that's the mandate we have, that if we have a local authority, a state authority that says it's not time to start church yet, okay, we'd like to, but we're going to follow. Now, the exceptions to that would be if a local secular authority was telling us, for example, we couldn't preach Jesus. We couldn't talk about the gospel. We couldn't preach the Bible. We can't proselytize. We can't share Jesus Christ. Well, then you don't follow that authority because it flies directly in the face of our mandate from God. Now, that's where I'm resting in Romans 13, because those things aren't happening. That is to say, this mandate not to gather as a large group is predicated on a health and safety issue, not a spiritual religious issue. So we are not being told we can't preach Jesus. We're just being told carry out your ministry in a way that doesn't involve 200 to 300 people together all at one time. Now, Church United, and again, I'm not trying to be critical of them. Everybody needs to evaluate and make judgment calls. I don't agree with their positioning. They're basically saying that they're going to meet even if the governor says no. And the verse that they're resting on, because I've talked to some of the pastors, the verse they're resting on is from Hebrews chapter 10, where it says, do not neglect the gathering together of yourselves. I'll just say this in the nicest of spirits that I can. When you're trying to interpret Scripture, you need to be very careful to apply rules of interpretation. One very critical one is that of context. Why was that written by the author of Hebrews to the church in the first century? Do not neglect the gathering of yourselves together, as is the habit of some. It's because that became the habit of some of the Christians. They stopped gathering for corporate worship. So the context of that statement was to lazy, disobedient Christians who were choosing other things as priorities over gathering. Friends, that is not our context. We are chomping at the bit to be back together again. So there's no need for someone to write to us, hey, don't neglect the gathering together, as is the habit of some. The only reason we're not is for health and safety reasons, and because Romans 13 says, submit yourself to the governing authorities that God has placed there. And so until they tell us that we can't preach Jesus, until they tell us we can't evangelize, or until they try to take our Bibles away, we're going to be standing on Romans 13 as our scriptural guide and understanding that Hebrews was meant for a different context. Nobody has told us we can't be the church. This situation has simply resulted in the fact that we're expressing being the church in different ways. And quite frankly, I will tell you, this is you ready for this? There is a real health to what's happened. Because it is very easy for us, to define being church as only what happens on Sunday mornings. And that may not be you. That may not be a big problem with our church. But my friends, it's very easy to say, yes, I go to church. And yet what I love about our church is we have all of our front lines, right? And you're committed to your front line. Well, friends, the healthy part about all of this is that now we're really compelled to spend more time on our front lines, praying for our front lines. I'm doing more of it, and I'm the pastor. I'm doing more of it now because we can't gather. I'm more focused on my neighbors. And so we've got to look at this and say, praise God for that element. Now, do I want to be together with all of us together? Yeah, yesterday. It is an endurance race. Not that it's a race, but it's a circumstance that calls for endurance. And so I'm simply saying to you, I want you to understand why we're not opening up on the 31st. Maybe you hadn't heard of that, maybe you have. But I do not want our church to be seen as entitled when AA groups, when Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups, whatever group you're thinking about, right? A bowling group, anybody, they can't meet. And yet we go fill our parking lot on May 31st. What are all our neighbors going to think? I don't know. But if I'm one of them, I'd say, why is the church doing what we can't do? We're following our governor. Why aren't they? Our reputation as believers is paramount, especially to our immediate neighbors. So for those and all the other reasons I already explained, we are going to thank God for the situation we're in and ask God that things could transition soon. And we're going to be patient. And I say, let's capitalize on what's happening. Don't waste this crisis. Don't waste a crisis. With every crisis, God gives us grace. What do I mean by all this? What I'm saying is, use this crisis where we are in many ways restricted and confined and say, God, what is it that you want to say to me about me? I've got more time on my hands. Don't waste the crisis. Don't waste the opportunity. Father, are there things that you've been wanting to say to me about my character or just about who I am? It might be affirming. It might be a kick in the rear end. It could be something very comforting. It could be something very challenging. But now is the time to say, God, what do you want me to know about me? What do you want me to know about being a Christian that I haven't previously paid attention to? Don't waste the crisis. Use it as an opportunity, not just to say, when can I get back together again? I'm asking that too. But if that's my only question, I'm way off base. My deeper question needs to be, while I'm in this waiting period, God, how can you use me for your glory in ways I wouldn't otherwise see it? Show me stuff I wouldn't otherwise see. I know you get this. You love Jesus. You've walked with him. You're mature believers. But I want to remind you that that's where our focus needs to be. Amen? I can hear it. Everybody's screaming amen. That's fantastic. Listen, I love you so much. This is a longer midweek update. It's a lot of information, but I hope you get my heart. We have never been stronger as a church. That's a fact. Good things are happening. People in our neighborhoods are coming to Christ. I had a chance to pray with one of the principals of one of our local high schools. I won't say which one because I don't want to single the individual out. But I had a chance to pray with the principal on the phone yesterday. And they just began to cry. Thank you. I really needed that. I wouldn't have called it, we talk every once in a while. But see, God is sensitizing our hearts to the needs around us in ways that we can often overlook. Don't waste this crisis. Amen? I love you so much. Join us tonight for midweek Wednesday night prayer, 7 o'clock. You can get the Zoom link on the email you receive for this midweek update. Join us tomorrow night for our Fruitfulness on Your Front Line, Session 2. If you missed last week, don't worry. We're going to do a review at the beginning. You'll be brought up to speed. Join us tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Fruitfulness on Your Front Line. You can get the link. Go to the website. You'll find it there under the events page. And then I'll see you Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, Romans chapter 6. It gets exciting. Chapter 6 moving forward. I love you so much. God bless you. Bye-bye.